business minds and thought leaders share the secrets to success. Welcome to Call Me Successful.
Ladies and gentlemen, today we're very grateful to have Jason Andrew with us. Jason Andrew is the CEO of Ray White Queensland. Welcome, Jace, to the podcast.
Thanks, Avi. Thanks for having me.
Some people know and some people have forgotten and some people kind of use you as an auctioneer as well. Still, you started your career as an auctioneer.
Yeah, we were talking off air about the story, and there's always a background. There's always a place that you start. Sort of started all the way back. The glory days, Ray White Redcliffe was the first place that I started, but I actually met a very young Hazley Cush at that stage, considerably more hair, and he drove this BMW Z3 at the time, but instead of it being the convertible where you press the button, he had to actually hop out and kind of pull it up, which was really quite funny. But the second that I saw him auction, I knew that I wanted to be nothing else. I was fortunate, I suppose, from there to meet a young Dane Atherton, who was an auctioneer, freelance auctioneer at that time. And once again, just, the auctioneering bug got me, and Dane took me under his wing. Yeah, and the auctioneering was within me, and away it all went.
It's very interesting. It's like every auctioneer you speak to, it's almost another auctioneer has inspired them to become auctioneers. But then you guys all go on to have your own rhythm, your own style, but it's still another auctioneer led you to that path.
Yeah. I think if you look back far enough, there's some idiosyncrasies of Ray, who was the original auctioneer, of course, that we probably all have. But all jokes aside, no, you generally, the auctioneering fraternity is very much unified. We spend a lot of time with one another. You compete against one another. And when you compete against one another, you're in locked rooms. And so you talk to one another a lot, and you develop some really good camaraderie and friendships. And through that, the next generation comes through, and the soil is tilled. And so, yeah, there's lineage, right back to, the Tony Fountain days, I would imagine, through into Phil Parker. Tony Fountain was Phil's mentor. Phil Parker was Hazley's mentor, and then away it's gone into this new generation of auctioneers.
So it's a very exclusive club, but then auctioneers are not afraid to train other auctioneers. It creates a bit of competition in the marketplace, right? But no one's really afraid to create other auctioneers.
How often do we talk about this, Avi? Healthy competition about, there is enough out there for everyone. And I think when you look at our data, auctions are about 30% of what it is that we end up selling. 6,800 auctions last year against 22,000 transactions. Ultimately, auctioneers training other auctioneers means that the balance, 14, 15,000 that is still there, and that's just within the Ray White network. Those private treaty people could convert into auction agents, and then there's just more and more and more. And so the belief always was that if you train more auctioneers, that would develop into auction businesses, and those auction businesses would become better businesses because of that, and that would create more. So we're not afraid of healthy competition. We're not afraid of training the next generation. We spend a lot of time together, and it was certainly a wonderful way to grow up in this industry with that type of mindset. And I think that's been a big part of the career because of the genesis or how it is that all that developed.
So we have a question for agents when they start. How do you start in the marketplace? How do you convince the sellers to list with you? How do you convince agents to appoint you as the auctioneer? Starting days when no one's really heard of Jason Andrew as much. How do you convince the agents? Like, what do you do to convince them to use you?
There's a really funny story. I was originally with Ray White Redcliffe as an administration assistant that then moved into property management as a just sitting at the front desk, helping out on property management, I suppose, before rolling into sales. But when I eventually moved across, it was to Remax at the time, Remax Redcliffe, which is where I met Dane. I kind of learned under a guy by the name of Michael Knights, and the mentor of Michael Knights at the time was a gentleman by the name of Mark McLeod. And I still remember asking a very similar question of, I don't have what it is that our competitors have, which is runs on the board, tenure, brilliant results. But the question got put back to me, which was, what do you have? And when you're able to articulate what you do have, which is time, effort, energy, all of these types of things, that becomes the commodity that you end up selling. And so I still remember sitting down at my first listing presentation and the vendor put it to me. Funnily enough, this is how incestuous Brisbane is. That vendor is the grandfather of a child who plays with my son at rugby. So they're in the same team, they're best friends, and I bumped into him the other day. But that vendor, I said to him, time, effort, energy, that's what I have. That's what I will do for you. And when you're originally an auctioneer and you don't have much, you need to remember not what it is that you don't have. You need to remember what it is that you do have. And people buy into that. People buy into what you believe, not what it is necessarily that you have. And so that was a really good question that was posed to me by Mark McLeod. And the more articulate that I became at expressing that to a customer, the easier the work became. And then obviously the commodity that you have changes. And we constantly talk in our line of work about getting off the line. What it is that you are selling ends up changing because you get more runs on the board. But to anyone who's starting out, it's always about what it is that you have instead of what it is that you don't have.
Did you have any problems, say, with Ray White, Redcliffe, and Remax? Did you have any issues, say, getting the LG Hooker agents to list options with you? How did you go about, resonating with different brands as well? Because some auctioneers haven't been able to do that.
The business early days developed into a genuine independent business, and so the attraction of basically all agencies, maybe outside of Ray White, who probably looked after themselves internally, became quite an easy sell. Primarily because they were looking for someone to drive them towards the project, and that energy that was there was something that they gravitated towards. And that's not necessarily about me. These young, ambitious people, from the Justin Nickers of the world who were talking offline about, to Thomas McGlynn, who's now the CEO of Bresic Whitney, Gordon McDonald on the Sunshine Coast. All these guys I've seen come through, and at early days, people buy into their energy, and that's what attracts people to them. They kind of want to bet on the underdog. They want to see the journey. Australians love cheering people on the way up. Of course, the unsaid component of that is they sort of love to boo you when you're at the top, but that's a different story. They certainly love to cheer you on the way up.
So similar themes running to when you start as an agent, the energy buy.
No question.
So I remember when I first started real estate, one of the things my principal told me is that Jason Andrew is the best trainer out there. And this was 2015-ish. In fact, we had this goal of, if we list 6 auctions, we get to train with Jason Andrew. So the question I have is how did that translate from you being a really, really great auctioneer in the marketplace to now Jason Andrew, the guy that everyone wants to be trained by? What was that? Because coming into auctions, you're calling auctions, training agents is a total different ballgame. So what was that? What led to that?
Avi, I appreciate you saying that. I mean, it's incredibly sort of humbling to hear that. But I think ultimately you are the sum total of the rooms that you are in and the people that you surround yourself in. And I think you build your reputation by the sum total of the heroes that you have. So I talk a lot about those starting days with Hazley and Dane and the Mark McLeods, and I was fortunate to surround myself with these wonderful people and learn and grow and evolve and be super inquisitive. And I think through that, my mother was an educational psychologist as well, and I think through those things, I was able to sort of express to businesses, the things that I had learnt along the way. Most of the key trainers at that time had a home, to the point that you were attempting to make earlier on, of how can you go from actually being a part of a brand to attracting independence. Most of the key trainers at that time had a contract with a big brand, and so therefore I think the independents were searching for someone or something, and I happened to be that person at that time. Josh Vegan has come through and all of these types of things now, but all of those people were looking, I think, for something at the time, and auctions were still a developing method back then. A very limited portion of the pool, and so right person, right time, I would imagine, but probably expressive enough and fluent enough through auctioneering and with the people that I'd surround myself with to get the message across.
So these were what I call your country road days. You used to walk in with your country roads, and now it's like tailored suits coming in. So
it's so funny you know that, but I actually thought, because this is post AFL Grand Final, I thought you were talking about Charlie Cameron there, but no, we can talk about country road. It was, yes, they were definitely my country road days.
So with the auctioneering, one thing that fascinates me is because I have no idea how it's judged, but the auctioneering competitions. This is something that you took part in a lot earlier on in your career, and you've won a lot of them. I was looking at the list of accolades. There's too many to name here, but obviously you call them the Ostros and the REIQ ones. What does that mean to you, and how does that bring out the best in you, and what does that competition actually look like? Because a lot of people are kind of like, when I speak to people about the auctioneering competitions, they're like, how does that work? Like, what is it? What is it?
Do you know what? I think I even see it in my kids now, and I'm sure you do as well. Kids love to compete. I went to an all-boys school, and there's this competition that is inside you. If you're pulled up at a set of lights, you want to sort of beat the person at the next set of lights, at least off the line, to 60 kilometres an hour, of course, Avi. The competition was there, and I think you leave school and maybe you haven't quite made it to the sporting levels that you had always aspired to, so you look for the next level of competition, and auctioneering gave us that. An auction competition is a structured bidding sequence. It's scripted. You're locked away in a room so you can't see it because everyone has to do the same sequence. And it's a wonderful way to test your skills. And I still to this day, ask our auctioneers to put themselves into that environment, because you can only get better in a place where you are constantly testing yourself. And I would argue through agency that, leadership is that place every single day. Do you have the energy to turn up, to ensure that you're constantly tested by your people? I'd argue that to be an agent, your listing presentation is a competition. Some of the best agents that I know, from Gavin Rubenstein, treats, the leaderboard that we have in Ray White as his competition, and auctioneering was no different. So the Queensland auctioneering titles were highly contested at that time. Fortunate enough to watch so many wonderful people come through, put your skills to the test, and each and every single year, I still have videos on my phone of a year out from auction competitions, rehearsing scripts and lines that I'd heard in football commentary or read in a newspaper, and I just wanted to try and insert it in there. So each and every single weekend when you go out into the field, you're trying new things and getting better every single day, and that's what it's all about. That's why I love those competitions, and really fortunate to climb, to some highs through that. But I think that those are wonderful stepping stones into broader things now, like corporate work, etc.
So do you think those awards, the competitions that you won, helped your career? Because people are like, I want to go with the best, right? That's the mentality of the agents.
Yeah, I think people gravitate towards that. Justin Nickerson and I used to always laugh because, you win an Australasian auctioneering title. It's something that you aspire to so much, and the trophy is enormous, and you're drinking out of the cup, and life is wonderful. And then the very next day, you're out on the hustings, and you're calling a live auction, and the person who's bidding against you, he's trying to buy it as cheap as what they possibly can, of course. They do not care about what happened the day before whatsoever. They are just trying to drill you, and so it's wonderful in the moment, and it's a wonderful period of time in your life. I could not have hoped for a better development space to certainly lead to the work that I do now, for sure.
So when I noticed that you're calling so many auctions back in say 2015, 2016, you were also calling a lot of auctions in New Zealand. How did that happen? Is it the similar marketplace, like as an auctioneer, same registration, same things going on?
Well, there's a huge shout out, and I've never necessarily thanked this individual. There's a gentleman over there by the name of Aaron Harbishern, who still is in our group, which is the Ray White group. And he was just a young guy working at Ray White Ponsonby, and he sort of saw some of the videos that I had posted. And Gal Buchanan and Simon Damerel, who were the principals of that business at that time, came along to the Australasian auctioneering titles, fortuitously, which were in New Zealand, in Auckland that year. And we executed a contract where I would fly over on a weekly basis to call auctions. And Avi, once again, in terms of development, new market, emerging market, a market that at that time was really starting to become a burgeoning market, and probably the capital of auctions only just a few years later. Some wonderful auctioneers over there. And it was a wonderful way to hone your craft. But once again, to the competition space that we were talking about earlier, you had to get better. You couldn't turn up there in your classic sort of colloquial Australian style, or your ochre Queenslandisms, like I used to say the word pool, which apparently I say is P-E-W-L, and the New Zealanders were very quick to remind me that it's double-O-L. It became, instead of chance, it was, take your chance and let's advance the bidding, and to speak all the time and then look at your speech pattern and rebuild it is actually a really interesting experience. And I would argue with any auctioneer or any agent or any leader that you are a professional public speaker. You're actually a paid conversationalist. And we need to do more and more work around the words that come out of our mouth. And all too often our brain comes second and our words or mouth comes first. But rebuilding your cadence or your voice pattern or the language that you are using is such a beautiful exercise. And the trips to New Zealand gave me that, and the auction competition certainly gave me that.
We have a running joke sometimes in our office and between principals that you're a bit like Eminem. Like you've got the same sort of thesaurus going on. The words we hear is juxtaposition and all these things just come out. Is this just you developing yourself, trying to, work on the vocab, or it just comes naturally to you?
Yeah, I mean, again, mum, educational psychologist, English teacher. I even see it with my children now, pulling them up on the words that they use. I don't like lazy language. It was really something that was given to me at a very early age. But also, why would you say 20 words when you can say 3? Been a big believer in that. And the English language is so beautiful. I think Australian sort of followed the American traits, whereas New Zealand followed the English traits. They are far more conservative. And I love that, ladies and gentlemen with a very hard D instead of ladies and gentlemen, which is what we say in Australia. And the more that we can practice and perfect what it is that we say, we can influence people at a far greater rate as against just being lazy because we don't necessarily know what's coming out of our mouth. Not attempting to say big words for the sake of it, but certainly not trying to dumb it down for the audience either, because I think then you come down to your audience instead of dragging your audience to where it is that you want them to be. And I think when you speak to children, you see it all the time. Would you like a lolly? You're coming down to them instead of pulling them up to where you actually want them to be. And I just think there's sort of wonderful lessons in all of that.
You spoke about influencing people. So you've done that as an auctioneer. You've influenced so many agents, so many agency principals. And now the different journey, why that journey to coming back to corporate or coming to corporate? How did that, is that in New Zealand? You went to New Zealand to start that journey? Or
yes and no. I mean, the trips to New Zealand I love the business that I work with over there, and I love the individuals that I work with over there. But as many who travel know, planes are fun the first few times, but then all of a sudden, there's only so many airport lounges you can sit in, and planes are delayed, and all of these types of things. And in the end, that reinvigorated or re-energized sort of exactly what I needed for auctioneering. But I knew that the end was inevitably creeping up on me from an auctioneering standpoint, always looking for what's next, always looking for what's around the corner. So I remember sitting down with, once again, I sort of used Hazley Cush as a sounding board, and I said, you run a business, no one is living here, maybe I could keep running my auction business and then do a living here. And at the time, a person had just started in Sydney as a head of our group, and as he said, that wouldn't interest you, would it? And it certainly did. But I remember the exact moment standing out the front of a crowd calling an auction, and I remember the moment when it was the 10th auction I'd called that day. I was running through the terms and conditions. And as I said before, I really enjoyed the language and the things coming out of my mouth and really concentrated on those words and impacting. But I still remember in that moment thinking to myself, you don't care and nor do I. It was the same way that I ended my football career when I just didn't want to tackle the person in front of me. And I didn't want to call another auction when I didn't enjoy it. And I realised that, and I appreciate the words that you say about the people we've impacted, but I think I wasn't having that impact anymore. I didn't have that love anymore. And
because you were the voice of property. That's what your company was called. That was the slogan, the tagline.
Yeah, and I just it was the energy had run out. So I think very blessed to. You hear about some of the names that I've used and some of those wonderful mentors or what I call heroes. Best thing you do is surround yourself with the right heroes. And very fortunate now in this line of work to, you look at Brian White and Dan White and these types of people. That next chapter in the book for me was very much about getting around new heroes and learning and testing yourself at something else.
So that led you to Sydney?
To Sydney, yeah.
Sea change? You were there every week anyway, flying in, flying out.
Yeah, and look, beautiful period of my life, tough period of my life. My wife at the time decided to sort of come down and then come back, and sadly through that we grew apart. But at the same time, the business in Sydney was just, once again, generationally needed a change in terms of the leadership of our businesses. And leaving Sydney, many of the business owners were sort of sub 40, and it had a really different look and feel. And I think we'd built for the next 20 years, which I was really excited about. And a mutual friend of ours sort of took that over and ran with that ball as hard as he could. Now another mutual friend of ours as well now runs that business. But yeah, Sydney was a wonderful place. My office was literally next door to Dan White, and I thought that was because, I was the guy that he'd recruited, and so I'd get the office next door to Dan. But it was because I still had my training wheels on. But what a wonderful mentor to have in Dan White, and some of those conversations, sitting down with Brian White at tables and speaking to franchisees, the things that you learn from the rooms that they have been in and the people that they have learned from. Yeah, very blessed.
I've heard you say before that you don't work for Ray White, you work for Dan White. What does that mean?
I think optically, people have a certain perception about our company, and I was exactly the same on the outside, and you're exactly the same on the outside. People make assumptions about things before they even know it. There's a great Abraham Lincoln quote, which is, "I don't like that man, I must get to know him." People make assumptions about everyone. Individuals, businesses, companies that they do or don't deal with. And that's what people think about Ray White. But I do believe, that Ray White and the assumptions that people have around Ray White have categorically now changed. Brian White, a wonderful leader, his journey in leadership from his father, Alan, to taking our business across the Tweed River and now the expansion that we have had, his legacy will be expansion. Dan's legacy is something altogether different. It's technology that empowers or enables agents. And that's a journey that I was excited about. When you sit down or you hear Dan on a similar podcast to this, you understand that he is heavily invested, not just monetarily, but through other forms of currency, time, effort, energy, all of those types of things into the future of our industry. And that's why I use that line. I work for Dan White. The whole point of that line is that people have a certain perception of Ray White, but Dan White is altogether different, and he's leading our company in a magnificent fashion, I believe.
Speaking of the company, so when you first started your role as Ray White Queensland CEO, remember you put the marker down saying we will sell 1 in 4 homes in the state. So what does that mean? Why is that a goal? And how far along that journey are we now?
So 4 years ago today, I started back in Queensland, October 1. Brian's got a beautiful quote, which is, you got to know what you want, you got to know how to articulate it. And I learned that. And I also believe that business can be very complex. People attempt to make it complex because you can hide in complexity. You wouldn't quite understand, Avi, because it's a really big business, 175 franchisees. You wouldn't, lots going on here. The more simplistic you make it, the fewer places you have to hide. And so I think when you know what you want, you know how to articulate it, you keep it simple, you can move en masse. And we talk about best in market. We talk about 1 in every 4 homes. 25% market share is an ambitious target. It is a stretch target. At the time of expressing that to our network and to our leaders, we were on the way down. We were heading towards 14% market share, which is where we bottomed out. Now proudly we're at 16.86% market share. You're still below our historical high of 18.1% market share, but I'm sure that you would agree. The business does have a really different look and feel about it. We've got some really big businesses, big property management businesses, big businesses with 100 plus staff, $10 plus million in GCI. Not an office on every corner. We find leaders and we build around them. That's something that I think is really significant and really important. And I think that's the way that our industry should be shaped, as against, if you have a heartbeat, you can sort of open an office, which was, classically the way I think that franchising was run, and certainly not the way in which we run franchising.
That statement I was going to ask you about, because it's frustrating for us as principals and agents as well. It's there's a Ray White on every corner. Like, how do we deal with that? Because that's not the case. I mean, might have been, like you said, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, but that's not the case anymore. But it seems like that we haven't been able to temper down that sentiment in the marketplace.
Yeah, you can't necessarily shake certain feelings or opinions or things that people will use against you, because I think if we spend all of our time worrying about what our competitors think, we won't pave our own path. So we hear a lot of stuff about you individually, about me individually, about Dan or Brian or Mark McLeod or our company as a whole. And I think we just need to continue to build what it is that we believe is right, what it is that the data is telling us, and ultimately in time that shakes itself off, and you have a new set of optics or parameters or belief systems that people feel that you have. And I like to think now that people do think that Ray White is a place that is investing heavily in technology. I do like to think that Ray White has some wonderful leaders, because we do. I do like to think that the talent pool is very deep. You look at the Teslans of the world, who's a very good friend of yours, the Gavin Rubensteins, the Lancashires and the like, the Cuttermans. These people are just such wonderful performers. To be a top 10 agent in Queensland this year, you had to write in excess of $2 million in Ray White. Extraordinary. And so I think through a bunch of work that is being done, ultimately, it's not like people will people will just stop talking about that one day, and they'll find something else to talk about.
They'll find something else. So where does this, because your focus has been along those lines, is best in market. So is best in market kind of summarize what you actually feel about the marketplace and where we're headed? Or you think they've already arrived as best in market?
I think best in market is, once again, sort of such a stretch target that it is, you're always testing yourself against it. You actually never arrive at that place. You know, there's that saying of, you know, the closer you get to potential, the further it is away. And so I think we love the language best in market, because I totally understand that under no circumstances are we best in market in all markets. We're 61 in 253 suburbs in excess of $100 million around Queensland, which is data that I spoke about with you recently. But it's the way that we test our business every single day, Avi. You know, we look at our leadership through the lens of, are we best in market? I look at my decision-making process through, is this best in market? When we go and look at taking out a training room, is this speaker best in market to speak to our people? And it continues. So at every layer, that question exists. And the beautiful thing about it is I like to think that our network has bought in. Certainly our corporate team members have bought in, because it's a way of every single email that goes out. I'll tell you a story. My fiance works in our company, as you know, and as you also know, that can be quite tricky, sort of balancing that relationship. And she recently sent out an email that had an error in it to our network. And I sat there, I was driving along, and I thought to myself, how am I going to confront this with her? Because it could be a very long night at home if this goes wrong. And in the end, I picked up the phone and I said, Bub, that wasn't best in market. And that's all I needed to say. And so again, you know, it's a wonderful way to have conversations that are also difficult. You know, it's a wonderful way for our leaders to have conversations with me when they want to provide us feedback. So yeah, look, it's you're never there to answer your question in a very long-winded fashion. You're never there, which is what I love about it.
So where are we going? Because the concentration from Ray White at the moment, Ray White Queensland, is the Olympics, 2032. Our messaging is around the Olympics. What do you foresee happening? Because we are training programs already set go, marketing's around the Olympics. So that's something big, close to your heart at the moment.
Yeah.
Where are you taking this, and where do you see it going for us?
I remember on the night, Avi, of the Olympics being announced, that I remember that night saying that the Olympics will define my tenure as Queensland CEO, because I thought that real estate in Queensland had now a very set runway. It had a very clear target. And if we didn't build in and around that, then we would be missing out. People like studying for a test or like doing their homework. They cram. And I think cramming is dangerous, particularly within business. You want to give yourself a big runway. So 2032 is out in front of us. We want to sell 1 in every 4 homes by 2032, which is 25 by 32, which we express to our network. We have a marketing fund that we are devoted towards that, as well as numerous other projects sort of in and around that. We have Olympic speakers coming and speaking to our people. You know, we have the voice of property, which we coined back in our old business, but have put in place now, the voice of property within the broader Ray White business, to talk about the Olympics and the infrastructure that are coming in, and the planning and the lead up to Queensland and where it is that we sit. We have a set date every year where we hold a big in-room auction, first being this year, but it is on the Olympic weekend as well that it is going to launch. So all of these things are there, they're deliberate, they are purposeful, with the eye on 8 years' time from now. And I think for all of us in real estate, we know that is in front of us, but the planning, as with all good business, should start earlier rather than later.
Final question for our listeners. How does Jason Andrew define success?
I love that question. I think when you go home at night and when you replay your day, you have to ask yourself the question: Did I do my best? And ultimately, if the answer to that is yes, then that's what I'm comfortable with. I head home every night and I look at my call logs through the day,
Is that through Nurture Cloud or?
That seems like a trap question, so I will answer yes, but the truthful answer is no. But because we don't have it for corporate, but I head home every day and I look and I replay the conversations and sometimes overanalyze, but asking the question of have I given my best? The beautiful thing about life and our industry is you can hop up every single day and you can give your best tomorrow. So a wonderful question, but I know it's a little bit deep, but certainly that's what I do at the conclusion of each day, just to bring finality to anything, because the worst thing that you can do is hold on to something into the next day. So attempting to close that loop out by asking that question is a simple test.
Jason Andrew, thank you so much for joining us in Call Me Successful.
It's been a pleasure, Avi. Thank you.
Appreciate your time.